So, I was cruising flights.to as I pretty much do as a daily activity and came across this. So, a developer named Marine RM, which I don't think I've ever heard of, could be wrong about that, made a J-36, so the new Chinese 6th-generation stealth fighter, which I guess is the first 6th-generation aircraft, period, in the sim. So, of course, you can see it says download again. I went ahead and bought it. I took the risk because, as you can see, these Marine RM people only really make ships for the sim. So how will this be? I don't know. We're going to find out, though. So here it is. I went ahead and loaded into Area 51. What better place to fly this thing? Now, already I'm noticing the textures aren't phenomenal. There's definitely a little bit of that shininess that you wouldn't necessarily get with radar-absorbing paint. Also, these tires and landing gear for $20 already aren't quite up to par. Again, this developer only really made ships before this. There's those 3 engines. How cool is that? So, I don't really know how much to expect from this. Let's go ahead and hop inside and at least see what the cockpit looks like. So here we are. This is supposed to be a cold and dark startup. You can see all of our electronics are already on. Now, again, we don't know what the interior of this plane looks like. Whoa. Okay, I can just go. This is actually a pretty cool view. The Chinese are the only ones you know, and the Chinese did not make this aircraft. The cockpit, though, just from a general textures perspective, I mean, even that text is pretty terrible. Let's be real. No idea what that says. A lot of this stuff also doesn't work. Dare I say most of this stuff doesn't work. Yes, most things in the cockpit do not work. So, we're not off to the best start here, but at least this thing looks cool from the outside, I guess. What I also meant to mention is this side-by-side setup. Obviously, Splane is not small for reference. A lot of people are calling it a fighter. I think it's more of a fighter-bomber, which brings me to my next point. Again, this side-by-side setup reminds me very much of the Su-34, which is a straight-up fighter-bomber, and I kind of like it. Okay, Engine 1 is now starting up. I don't believe there's any animation inside here or in the intake, which is yeah. There you can see some fans in there, and they have no animation for moving. So we'll go ahead. Also, these are very generic sounds. Listen, these might be the F-18 sounds. I'm sure someone in the comments will know better than me, but definitely very generic sounds nonetheless. We'll go ahead and wait till these engines completely spool up, and then we'll taxi out. Okay, we are all spooled up now. Now, one thing I wanted to see is, for instance, on the B-2 Spirit, when in the air, because there's no vertical stabilizer or vertical surface to control rudder, the little flaps on the B-2 will open on one side to slow that side of the plane down. So, for instance, if I did left rudder, these ones would open to slow down the left side of the plane. So then the nose comes left. Now I am using full rudder left and right now, and we're getting no such movement. You can see our nose will down here moving very freely. But enough of that. Let's actually get this thing in the air. Let's taxi out here. It needs a lot of throttle. Let's not hit that ferret truck there. Like you can see, we're at 65% throttle moving this slowly on the ground. Let's see what kind of payload we have as well. That's with only 40% cargo and 50% fuel, which is well more than 10,000 pounds less than its max takeoff weight. So that does seem a little bit weird that it needs that much throttle to, like, even when I go down to 45, you can visually see how much that's causing it to slow down. But that's neither here nor there. Rudder feels relatively sensitive compared to other planes. But we are on the runway now. It is time to attempt a little takeoff. First, let's see if flaps and those speed brakes work at all. So here we go. I'll do flaps. 3, 2, 1. Okay. So it appears that flaps are indicated here. You see it says flaps 30 degrees, but I can go back to 0 flaps, and it looks identical. So, that's definitely a bummer. Let's check speed brakes. So, speed brakes are immediate on or off. No animation again. That this plane is beginning to disappoint me a little bit more with every little thing we find. Anyway, let's see how it flies though. That's more important, I guess, than any of this crap. Again, you need so much throttle to even start moving. We'll not take off with 30 degrees. We'll take off with 15 degrees of flaps. Now, I'm expecting this thing to fly. Oh wow. You got to love 3 afterburners side by side. That is incred. I mean, the animation for them really aren't bad. I kind of like that we're going Mach point 5. Let's get off the ground here. Now we're in there. Let's check the landing gear. Again, like I was saying, the texture on this gear is not great. Animation is there. I presume it looks something like that in real life, although I don't really have anything to go on. Now, like I was talking about the flight characteristics, I expect this to handle maybe like a small Vulcan or a small OK. We just hit Mach 1 climbing at 13,000 feet per minute. That's pretty aggressive. Or maybe a small, probably more like a small B2 considering we have no vertical control surface. But that takeoff didn't feel like anything abnormal. Okay, we can see some of our payload here. You just click right here, and that opens that up. So there it's closed there. At least there is an animation. Although it's not great. We'll click the other one. Oh, and they actually kind of drop down a little bit. I can appreciate that. Nothing too crazy, but it's there nonetheless. Considering how the rest of this plane is, that's honestly slightly surprising. There we go. Ailerons honestly look really cool. Now I don't know if they have aileron animations that look pretty good like these ones do. Why can we not get some animation for speed brakes that's not just instantaneously open or close? Not so sure about that. But let's do a little bit of actually flying here and see if we can see how it feels. Let's check how many Gs it can pull because why not? We'll go back into full afterburner vapor. Not the worst vapor I've ever seen, but definitely not the best either. Okay, we're pulling 6 Gs, 7 Gs, 8 Gs. Okay, we hit 8.8 GS there for a second, which I presume the real plane can probably get nowhere near that cause that's quite a lot. And like I was mentioning, flight characteristics. I would assume they're just taken from some default plane because they don't feel at all like the top Mach B2, which is probably my favorite add-on. And because the B2 is a flying wing, it genuinely feels different with the top Mach version, where I think a lot of developers maybe don't get that right. Not that I know what it feels like to fly a B2, but a flying wing must feel different than not a flying wing, right? So, let's come in here, see how this landing is. Maybe it can redeem itself slightly, and we'll just see what happens. So here we are coming in. Quick note, you can see we're flying at 110-ish knots, and it doesn't feel like we're about to stall, which is interesting considering we took off, or had to take off at a much higher speed than that. So, whatever the reason for that is, I don't know. Let's see how this touchdown goes, though. Here, 108 knots. Like we're really flying slow here. There we go. We are on the ground. Speed brakes out. Regular brakes as well. Landing felt incredibly easy. And to be honest, it didn't feel like it was anything other than any regular plane in the simulator. So, in conclusion, it's definitely disappointing. It's definitely not worth the $20 that it cost. But if you're one of those people that really just wants to get screenshots and stuff, it's at least